All right, so we made it out, so to speak, right? Last video I talked a bit about, how I made a plan to go to college. I picked a college that was purposely, hours away, where it was not easy for my family to get to me. Um, I had a lot of anxiety around like traveling and going places and just returning home too, and how that ultimately kind of affected my mind. So I think, I don't remember what the official diagnosis was, but it was some sort of like temporary psychosis essentially. Because once I realized what was happening, then I didn't really necessarily like fall into those symptoms. I will say it's really important to know that I had this break of reality because it affects my future relationships and how I was able to be manipulated in some senses around that. But yeah, for this, it was a temporary psychosis. I was able to recover. I still to this day like have those like thoughts, those breaks of reality, but I'm able to identify them. So I'll say like it never went away. Just like the travel anxiety has never really gone away. It's just I've been able to cope with them a lot better. So also at this time, like I said, I'm studying psychology, so I'm learning a lot about like people, relationships, behaviors, things of that sense. And I'm kind of like coming to terms with like my dad has some very classic narcissistic kind of controlling traits. And I'm remembering that my mom like had identified this throughout my childhood. She would always call my dad narcissistic, and I never really knew what that meant until I got to college and I studied it. And I was like, wait a second, like, does she know what he's doing and she's still there? And so probably around my end of my junior year, as I'm getting more educated in this, I like finally got my mom on the phone when my dad wasn't around. He was out with his buddies or something. And I basically told her, like, growing up in that environment, like, was probably far more harmful than if you had ever tried to leave rather than stay. And I don't understand why you stayed in that environment. And like, I don't know that I ever got a full answer from her other than like, she was sorry and like she understood how I felt. But yeah, I don't think I ever got an answer from her as to like why. But I know why. Like my dad, she was terrified of my dad, and she also really loved him and cared for him, right? There was definitely that duality. So, by the time I was a senior in college, I hadn't had any serious relationships. I had some friends, but I hadn't really dated. And I ended up in a situationship my senior year where the guy was he was maybe a transfer student, so he still had a couple more years. I was graduating that year, and like I went on a couple dates with him, and I ended up really liking him, and I thought I expressed that, but for him, I think it was just kind of a perfect situation. This person's leaving. I'm not really wanting anything serious. And at the time, situationships weren't really a thing. Like there wasn't really a lot of knowledge around what that is. That didn't come until much later. Like, remember, online dating's not a thing. Like people aren't generally like there's gossip columns and things of that sort, but like you don't really have like Tinder in this space. Like it's pre all of that. So I really like him. We ended up talking, going on a couple dates. But there's never kind of like a definition of like what the relationship is, which definitely gives me a lot of turmoil because I'm feeling like I'm expressing that I really like this person and I'm not getting that back. And I don't really understand a lot about relationships at this point. So I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why do I keep encountering people that aren't choosing me? Like, what is going on here? Not understanding, a lot of my self-worth and my value of myself was very low at this time. And also, I'm just reeling from all the emotional stuff that's happening within my family. Which at this time, right after I graduate, I'm still talking to this guy. And, you know, after I graduate, my mom goes missing. I get a call maybe a couple days after my graduation from my dad that my mom was supposed to go to a doctor's appointment and she never came back. And he has no idea where she is and have I heard from her. And I'm like, nope. I have no idea what this is about. I literally haven't heard anything from my mom, so I don't know what's going on. Now, that doctor's appointment was, you know, something to do with her cancer treatment. And I didn't mention this earlier, but when I was 9, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I don't think I knew at the time, but it was pretty late stage and she was able to recover. And at this time, as I'm graduating from college, I'm getting the sense that, you know, something's going wrong in that space with her treatment from my dad. And my dad's not really vocalizing, you know, what is going on with him and my mom as far as like why she would be leaving other than this piece. So that's what was happening right as I was graduating from college. I did move home very briefly because I didn't land a position right away. This was the first recession that I graduated in. And so I was still looking for a position. My plan was to go with a couple friends. We're gonna take a road trip during the summer, and then hopefully by the end of that summer, I would have a position where I wouldn't have to live at home. And the goal was to move back to Northern California for a bit. So we'll talk a little bit more in the next video about what happened and why my mom left and what I found out.